Theranica is a prescribed digital therapeutics company. The mission of the company is to help people that suffer from idiopathic pain diseases. These diseases are typically express themselves mainly with pain. The pain is very physical, visible. It has biomarkers, it can be traced and so on. But in most of these diseases, it's not clearly understood why there is so much pain. These are chronic diseases. They're very debilitating. Patients suffer from them for years, sometimes for decades. And our mission is to provide these patients with a solid, efficacious, safe therapy that can help them manage their disease. Migraine affects about 12% of the population. So if you take a country like the US, for example, there are about anywhere between 35 to 40 million people diagnosed with migraine. It affects mainly women, so there's a ratio of about 5 to 1, I would say in favor, but not so much in favor of women. I mean, they suffer more. It's very debilitating. A lot of people that, people that don't suffer from migraine or don't have a close relative or friend that suffers from that tend to believe that migraine is just another type of headache, while it's actually not. It's a combination of symptoms. Headache is obviously the most famous one, but it's a combination of symptoms, including nausea and sensitivity to light and sound. And it's really debilitating. A lot of patients of migraine, when they get a migraine attack, they cannot function for anywhere between a few hours to sometimes a whole day. So the Reveal is a device that currently have FDA indication for acute treatment of migraine, while we're also working on preventive treatment of migraine. But it's a wearable device. It's an electrical wearable device that is operated by a smartphone application. The mechanism of action is based on applying an electrical signal that was specially engineered and developed to trigger nociceptive nerve fibers under the skin on the upper arm. And by recruiting or triggering these nerve fibers, it provides the brainstem a message which triggers yet another mechanism in the central nervous system, specifically in the brainstem, which is capable of aborting the migraine through releasing of certain neurotransmitters, mainly norepinephrine and serotonin, that are very strong analgesic agents. Yes, the latest study that was published in Frontiers in Pain Research was one of the real-world evidence studies that we're doing. So basically, in the life of a therapy, typically, once you get the FDA approval, you're expected to continue and run studies. These are sometimes called phase 4 studies. This is a terminology that's taken from pharma, where the focus, while in the pre-FDA studies, the focus is mainly on randomized control studies where you can compare the therapy to a placebo therapy. In the real world, you actually test the therapy in real world environment, really in everyday life. Patients they don't have any specific instructions. They just use the user manual, whatever the physician has told them, and they use the device as they see fit. And this is very interesting because it follows, these studies typically follow, first of all, a large number of patients. So that's if you compare real-world evidence to controlled studies, typically the sample size in real-world studies is much larger. And in this study specifically, we had many thousands of patients included. The other thing is that it allows testing the therapy over a large period of time. Okay, so it's, even if you take an example from the recent, COVID vaccinations by Pfizer, Moderna, or others, They were initially tested on about 25,000 patients in a very short time. They were approved because of the urgency partially, and then they were released to the market. But really, the most important studies were the ones that just followed that, the studies that tested the actual efficacy and safety of these vaccinations in hundreds of thousands of patients. So this is similar to what we're doing here. What's interesting about, and I think unique about our technology, is that in most cases, in real-world studies where patients are not enrolled into a formal study and so on, the results are being collected retrospectively. In other words, after some time, physicians or other people are calling the patients and asking them, well, how did you feel when you take, or what was your level of pain, and so on. And this kind of data, retrospective data, is usually of less quality. Because of the Narivio application and because of the data collection system that sits behind the Narivio application, we're actually capable of collecting prospective data, real-time data from patients. It's being stored in a HIPAA-compliant server. And even though in this case, we collected the data over 20 months, the data is really prospective, real-time data. So, and I think this is, this is quite impressive. The key takeaways are, number one, that the efficacy that is demonstrated in real life, with real patients, is almost exactly the same as the one that was demonstrated or was shown in the control study. So this this solidifies the result in the sense that this is what the pivotal study was not just a coincidence, or it wasn't just because the patients were they knew that they are in a study and so on. But this is really, these results are really repeated in real life. The second thing is, or the second outcome or insight is that the therapy is sustained over a long period of time. One of the limitations of controlled studies is that they're short. In our case, in our controlled studies, we had patients using the device as part of the study for 4 weeks, sometimes 6 weeks, but not more than that. In this real-world evidence, patients have been using the device for more than 1.5 years. So this tells you that even over a long period of time, number one, there's no risk. That is the most important thing. There's no safety issue, but there is no degradation in the efficacy over time. In other words, one of the, especially in neurology, one of the problems with some of the therapies is that the brain has a certain quality that's called habituation. It sort of gets used to new stimulus or new stimuli, and after some time they're not as effective as they were at the beginning. We have, within the electrical parameters of the device, we have a certain mechanism to overcome habituation, and it was interesting to see that patients have a stable response over 1 year, 1.5 years, and this is a very important thing because it gives depth to this therapy. And the other thing, quite often we're being asked about the intensity. Again, this has to do with habituation. Physicians are sometimes worried that patients would need to always use a higher intensity, which in our case is higher dosage. In other words, they would need to increase the dosage more and more and more over time. And we showed that actually the intensity that is being applied by patients is stable over a long period of time. So all this really, I would say, connects between the scientific evidence that was collected in the control studies and the need for a long-term sustainable therapy in real life. The ultimate goal of Theranica is to provide a line of therapies, digital therapies, in the sense that they're based heavily on using data, processing data, and utilizing data, a line of products that addressing these debilitating diseases. So if you talk about 3 years from now, We see the migraine therapy becoming a first-line therapy, at least in the US, hopefully in other regions, but definitely in the US. We see ourselves coming up with a solution for fibromyalgia, a solution for TMJ, which is a chronic pain in the jaw. And we see Theranica, our role model are device companies that have managed to bring their solutions to tier one or to first line of therapy, companies like Dexcom or Abiomed and so on. This is where we see Theranica in a few years from now. I think where we are today is very exciting. When you start when we founded the company, there are so many unknowns, so many challenges on the way. First of all, you think, is this, scientifically, this should work. Will this really work in clinical studies? And then, okay, once you get over that hurdle, you're, okay, it works, let's move on. And the next stage is the FDA going to prove that and accept that? And we know that the FDA can be very difficult. So we got that taken care of. And then you're, okay, the next step is to really bring this to the market and get the feedback of patients and physicians. We've done that since the early 2020 for about a year and a half, until half a year ago. And at that point in time, we said, okay, so, patients like the device, physicians are easy prescribing that. There's one more thing to prove, and this is that health insurance companies are willing to pay for that. And this is what we've done over the last half a year. We started engaging with health insurance companies, and we have already several agreements with some of them. So I think with this, we feel very confident that this is our time to scale up and to really accelerate the sales and marketing activity of the company.